All right, we have a great interview for you guys today. It's time to pap it. Mike Papantonio, America's lawyer and host of Ring of Fire. Mike, how you doing?
Doing well, Cenk.
Great to have you on. So today there's a lot to talk about in the news. You're a huge progressive. There's progressive issues to talk about. Also legal issues, so it's perfect to have you on. EpiPen's in the news a lot. We covered it here on the Young Turks. So Mylan says, well, I just had to raise the price of EpiPen sixfold. I'm not sure their cost went up sixfold. So when pharmaceutical companies say, no, we have America's best interest in mind, we want to make sure that you guys are healthy, do you believe them, or could there actually be a profit motive involved here, Pap?
Well, the profit motive is astounding. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of these cases, Lipitor is 4,600% increase, which is profit. It's virtually a profit. You look at Prilosec, 69,000% markup in that drug. The problem here is, Cenk, every time Congress talks about this, the American people believe, geez, something's going to happen. The really ugly part about this is these Democrats who you believe might be on the consumer side are just the opposite of that. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the history on this issue, when there was the Obama change in health care, part of the issue was, shouldn't we be able to negotiate with these pharmaceutical companies and say, you're charging too much? Every country in the world does that. We're one of the few countries where we can't sit down with the makers of Lipitor and say, you know what, 4,600% is just damn highway robbery, and you shouldn't be able to do that. But unfortunately, our Congress and our Senate said, no, we're not going to do that. As a matter of fact, Obama agreed to not doing that, and Hillary Clinton agreed to not doing that, because they are very much the favored son of the Democratic elite where it comes to fundraising.
So, Pap, here's the thing. It's maddening because the Republicans claim that they don't like crony capitalism. This is the definition of crony capitalism, where the drug companies say you're not allowed to negotiate with us, which is unbelievable. And we're going to have a 12-year monopoly. And the Republicans say, okay, we love it. That's the one part we like. We got no problems with that. George W. Bush started that in the first place, right? Then you got the Democrats who pretend to be on the people's side. They love it too. When they claim that they don't like money in politics, they claim that they want cheaper healthcare alternatives for the American people. So it's hard not to get frustrated as the American people get lied to by both sides over and over again. What do you think is at the heart of this? What's driving this, where the politicians keep lying to us in such a brazen and obvious way and expect us to keep taking it?
$300 million in political gifts is really at the heart of it. The other part of it, Cenk, is when you were doing the story on EpiPen, you were really, we followed your story, by the way, on Ring of Fire. But when you led with that story, corporate media ignored it for days. They ignored it for this reason. It's the same way that I can't cover. When I used to do MSNBC, as you know, I would appear as a contributor. They made it impossible for me to talk about stories like this because their advertisers wouldn't let them do it. When I'd try to talk about Bayer Corporation doing some horrendous thing, they simply didn't allow it, Cenk. They simply said, the guys on the 50th floor, we're getting too much advertising money from Bayer. We can't do that story. So it's not just the political infrastructure that's the problem. It's the corporate media infrastructure. And but for social media, but for efforts like you're doing to get these stories out there, these stories will never be told. Think about this, Cenk. I had to write a book. I have a book out, and thank you, by the way, for advertising it, called Law and Disorder. Now, one reason for writing the book was that some of the stories in that book will never be told because corporate America won't tell them, corporate media won't tell them, and unfortunately, the American public, on this story, for example, on the EpiPen story, the public has, they get maybe a chance to see a headline. Maybe they get to see the news at night, and they see the headline that EpiPen has this outrageous markup. But they don't understand how much a part of the big problem is there that we won't solve. And the big problem is it's become cultural, institutional. And unless we do something about that, our prices of medicine are going to continue to rise. we're going to have the same CEOs making decisions on just like this 10 years from now. And Congress won't do anything about it. Most of the time we see presidential will take no executive action to do something about it, although they could.
So for the people at home, if you haven't seen this already on Ring of Fire or Young Turks, you got to understand the drug companies are actually the biggest lobby in America. They're a bigger lobby than oil companies, than the banks. It's unbelievable. And Pap's absolutely right. They're a giant block of advertising. And if you are in the TV business, you're in the advertising business. And so they're not, those advertisers, as a comedian once said on our show, but again, it's both funny and not funny, is they're our God. Is Maz Jobrani, he's a Muslim comedian. People say, well, you can't make fun of Allah when you do comedy in the Middle East. He said, here in America, you can't make fun of drug companies. You can't make fun of advertisers because they're our God. They're our Allah, right?
Yeah. What happened, Cenk, is this. There was a CEO used to stay with the company sometimes for 25 years, okay? And then they had this new MBA theme that they taught in MBA school, and it's called a quick profits, big risk kind of setup. And that means a CEO is moving into a drug company. Maybe it's Pfizer or Merck or whatever. They move in now for 2 to 3 years. And their only concentration, Cenk, is to try to increase that bottom line by maybe 1/8 of a penny. Because if they increase that bottom line 1/8 of a penny, what ends up happening is their bonuses expand, all of their golden parachute issues expand, life is good. But then they leave the cleanup problem to the next CEO. So what we do is we see these quick bursts of huge increases in the cost of these pharmaceuticals, and we see something else, Cenk, and that is we see very poor science taking place. We actually see what happens is they make bad decisions on clinicals. They're not bad decisions, they're intentional decisions. And people end up dying or becoming crippled because the company puts an awful product out there so that CEO can increase their bottom line by about 1/8 of a penny. And it's unfortunate that we don't take action on it. And unfortunately, I think it's left up to social media to get these stories out there because corporate media will not tell these stories.
Right. Well, luckily, their power is waning and our power is growing because a lot less people are watching TV these days. Okay, so let's move on to another issue, and that's the alt-right. I'm told that this is a new phenomenon, Pap. And they got a whole new name for it. It's called alt-right, so it must be new. Yet it seems like the same old racism to me.
Yeah, what happened was Lee Atwater, when he launched the Ronald Reagan presidential bid in Philadelphia, Mississippi, his goal was to create a new Republican, a new brand. He was about branding Republicans in a way that would appeal to the very racist, very divisive, very evangelical right. He understood if he could tie up the red states all over the Southeast, that he thought he could win the presidency. He even back then, interestingly enough, Cenk, he even back then was considering how do we gerrymander Democrats out of power, even back then when he launched Ronald Reagan in Philadelphia, Mississippi. But what he did back then, it was a statement that it's okay to be a racist. Back then they used to call it dog whistle. Now we call it bullhorn. Now you have Republicans standing up at the top of the mountain saying these things that we used to call dog whistle. It makes me crazy when I hear Hillary Clinton use the term dog whistle, that this is dog whistle talk. This isn't dog whistle talk. There's nothing different about the racism that was launched in Philadelphia, Mississippi, back when Ronald Reagan was running for president, and what we're seeing now. We have to admit the obvious. It is the brand of republicanism. They can dress it up. You can put some Republican in a three-piece suit. You can put him driving a Bentley with a Rolex watch. You know what he is? He's still that basic racist that lives down in the South and holds up those racism signs every chance they get. That's what Lee Atwater launched back in the Reagan years. And nothing's different. We just have been unwilling to say this is the brand of republicanism. It's the same thing.
So, but I think there is one thing slightly different. So, and hear me out on this, Pap. So, back when Reagan gave that speech, and not enough people know about it, I mean, he went down and launched his campaign, as you said, from Philadelphia, Mississippi, where civil rights workers were killed. And he didn't give that speech lamenting their death. he gave that speech there as a wink and a nod to the people down there, like it's all okay. He did not mention them. And that was a very, very curious place to launch your campaign, to give that speech. See, that was a dog whistle. For anyone who wanted to hear it, they knew why he was in Philadelphia, Mississippi. They knew why he didn't talk about the civil rights workers and why it was wrong to kill them. They knew all that, right? But for the rest of the country, sitting in California or New York, you might have no idea why he was down in Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
Now, these days, I think what the difference is maybe, and I'm being a little hopeful here, this is the last gasp of the angry, racist white man, right? And I want to be super clear. Obviously, not all white men. We're talking about the racist Republican, angry old guy. Mike's white. I'm not talking about Mike. I'm not talking about the overwhelming majority of the country, right? But I think that they think that demographically they're never going to win another national election. So they put the dog whistle away and they came out with a human whistle. And they're just saying it now. We don't like the Muslims. We want to keep them out. We don't like the Mexicans. We want to keep them out. We want to build a wall. And on it goes. So I think the only difference in my mind is they've just declared it a little louder and a little clearer this day and age, partly because they're on their way out.
Yeah, let's hope. Although, I've been in the South, I've been raised in the South, Cenk, and it is the biggest problem in the shift. The biggest problem in the shift is this racism is such an integral part of the evangelical religion down here. And I mean, I know that sounds like a remarkable statement. There's been plenty written about it, but the two almost go hand in hand. And so as the evangelical religion concept about racism flourishes, the political aspect of it flourishes as well. It's very difficult to interrupt it.
I hear you on that. And so they can call it any new name they like, but the bottom line is we don't like the others. And you should be afraid of the others, whatever minority we decide to pick on today, whether it's African Americans, Mexicans, Muslims, gays, or all of them, right? But you should be afraid of them, and I alone can protect you, as Donald Trump put it.
Yeah. Fear is a very powerful thing, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's conclude on this. So as you can tell, I'm beginning to be a tiny bit hopeful about the general election, and by hope, it is a dim hope that that Donald Trump is less and less likely to win. Now, in which case you get the establishment, so it's not like there's anything great to celebrate. It's just not the worst case scenario. But there's progressive elections all across the country, including down in Florida. What's your sense of this election, Pap? Do you think it's going in the right direction? Are you a little concerned? Where do you stand?
Well, I think this. I think Bernie's idea of this, of a progressive, the new revolution, the idea that we can be heard, I think we're going to see it down in Florida, for example. We have two races down here. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is running against Kavanaugh down in South Florida. You've got a guy named Murphy who is he's a Democrat, but he's certainly a Wall Street Democrat, third-way Democrat. Harry Reid loves him. All the establishment loves him. He's running against Alan Grayson. But the question is, will the progressives show up? Will the progressives show up and say, listen, we're serious about what we said. We loved the message that Bernie had. We're serious about changing things. Right now you got Kavanaugh is still down in the polls. You've got Grayson still down in the polls. So it's both of those elections are important, if nothing else, for the statement the progressives actually did what they said they were going to do and they got organized.
All right. Mike Papantonio, host of Ring of Fire, America's Lawyer, author of Law and Disorder, along with, I think, 5 other books. Check it all out. Pap, thanks so much for joining us on the Young Turks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Cenk.